Good evening, everyone. Good evening to everyone out there and to everyone in here. It's been a while since I've done this. I don't know about you, but my legs are feeling like Jell-O. Very soft and rubbery. And really welcome to at least one person here who's completely new to this ceremony. And it can seem pretty way out there. And it's interesting because of all the ceremonies that we do regularly, it's sort of the most elaborate, you could say. And it's interesting because it's really all about how we deal with how we make mistakes and how we ourselves create evil in the world. And I think at this time, especially because there just seems to be a world out of control at the moment in terms of the amounts and the intensities of evil being created on a very large scale here and abroad, just everywhere. It can sometimes feel like how we are and what's going on inside ourselves is somehow less important than what is happening out there. But I think in a lot of ways the opposite is true, because how we're doing right here with ourselves and with each other is more important than ever. I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not be experiencing tremendous anger, to be experiencing tremendous fear, to be experiencing tremendous anxiety in the world right now. But at the same time, I think sometimes we can lose ourselves in those emotions about what's happening out there and kind of miss when those emotions become harmful and detrimental because they're to do with our own greed, anger, and ignorance, and not the greed, anger, and ignorance in the larger arena. And we can stop paying attention to this because we're so lost in focusing on that. And it's really through our attention to just this that we actually heal ourselves and where the actual transformation of our practice takes place. How do we ourselves deal with our own evil karma, our own greed, our own anger, and our own ignorance, which are here all the time. I think it's just part of what it is to be a human being. And I can't remember which one, but there's one poem where there's a monk who keeps sitting and it's like polishing tile, He said once, I sit enough, I will no longer be a tile. We will always have greed, anger, and ignorance, but what we do with them is what changes. And the longer we work with them, the more they actually, and the more we can begin to see them as the actual fertilizer of our practice, not necessarily this thing that we're going to get over, but the things that we're actually going to get into, and through getting into them with our mind, you could say, of zazen, with wisdom and compassion, these are what enrich our own lives and actually join us all together. It's what allows us to have compassion in others, because we are not separate. It's in us too. And there's a vulnerability that takes place when we actually meet these energies in ourselves instead of trying to hide them, cut them off, separate from, pretend they're not happening, put them onto other people. But if we can just open to them, like, God, I was really an asshole. What was going on there? You know, like, not what did the other person do, what caused this, really, what was I feeling in this moment? Was it shame? Was it fear? Was it anger? So I thought in this ceremony, usually you pick one precept to talk about in particular, and considering what's happening. For some unknown reason, I thought the precept of not lying seems like it might be useful. And I always found it helpful to look at the 3 different translations of the various precepts that we use to actually look at our own behavior. So for those of you who are completely new to this, the precepts, in a way, they almost act as mirrors or guides or doorways, different ways that we can enter and enter into ourselves and see ourselves in ways that, well, speaking for myself, I just never did before having these tools. And I think every spiritual tradition has them in one form or another. So the precept of not lying, number 4, translated by Dharma, who is sort of our founder of Zen, says, self-nature is subtle and mysterious. In the realm of the inexplicable Dharma, not preaching a single word is called the precept of not lying. So that's kind of very interesting in a way. Not preaching a single word is the precept of not lying. So what is that? To preach a single word. As soon as we declare with utmost certainty that my word, my view, my opinion is what's happening, you may think whatever you think, but let me tell you what's really going on. However progressive, enlightened, or whatever that might be, as soon as we go there, we're lying. isn't to say that we shouldn't have opinions, because we need to have opinions. But we don't need to preach them. We need to be aware, always with humility, that that's what they are. That there is always something more beyond that we're not seeing. And to make room for that. Dogen says, the Dharma wheel turns from the beginning. There is neither surplus or lack. The whole universe is moistened with nectar, and truth is ready to harvest. So, you know, for me, he's kind of getting at that actually at each moment, if we can really, again, coming back from our mind or our functioning of zazen, just be really present in the moment to what is happening inside of us in relation to outside of us. The truth is always ready to harvest. And while that sounds very simple, and in a certain way, it is very simple, you know, to just really come back to what is real. Not what we think we should be feeling, not what we think should be going on, or not what we think is going on, and every permutation of those two things, but to just really tune in to our authentic experience, and not try to hide it, or change it, or make it better, or push it down. It's always right here. And what gets in the way of us seeing that? Again, it usually has to do with all these feelings we have about ourselves and others, that somehow we're not enough, that the world's not enough, that somehow whatever's happening shouldn't be happening. But there's always causes and conditions for what are happening, and more than what we can see, which I think is pretty evident right now. To see, and in some ways to actually understand, and to acknowledge that. And then Zen peacemakers, who are our contemporaries, translate this precept as listening and speaking from the heart. This is the precept of non-lying. Again, so I think it gets back to that essential thing of just really being real. To really listen openly, as much as we may not want to hear what's being said. And maybe we'll hear something different in it, or another way to meet it, or to just, while we're listening, try to hear what's underneath the words, what's really being said. And to try to speak that way. Again, to not necessarily try to be clever, to not try to be witty, to not try to, whatever it is, you could fill in the blank. which is really just speak to the truth of what's happening inside ourselves. Makes room, I think, for the doorway that this precept offers us to open and to let us experience reality in a different and more open and more connected way. So often, you know, when we lie, it's because we want to hide something. I mean, that's essentially more or less, any way you box it, that's kind of what we're doing, even with ourselves often. And, you know, it's a mystery why it's so hard for us to admit when we make a mistake, when we fuck up, to admit we don't know what we're doing, or that, like, I'm really sorry, I really hurt you. And we'll do a million circles to avoid having that conversation, or to just simply admit that, or to act like we know a lot more than we may actually know, or whatever it is. It's our ego just getting in the way of a true and real connection. And, it's really our humility and our vulnerability and our humanity. I think ultimately that connects us all. And it's why we need each other. We need to support each other. And we need to be compassionate with each other, because the world right now is not a very kind place. And the level of brutality and cruelty and rage and ignorance and lying about all of it. One big, beautiful bill. Is in in my lifetime, I've not experienced the likes of it. So how we are with each other is just so important, to strengthen each other, to care for each other, to just be kind, so we can know that actually there is still kindness in this world, and even if we all die tomorrow, it would be nice doing that. Maybe a simple experience of kindness in our hearts and in our minds. Anyway, just really encourage everyone to think about this. How do I lie? And why am I lying? And to just let ourselves actually be vulnerable. And that's where real interdependence happens, and I think that's what this is all about. And we're so fortunate to have this community where people are doing this all the time in so many ways, large and small, with each other and in the world. So let's just try to bring it everywhere. So thank you all for being here, and tell the truth.